Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here tonight with Kurt Leavins. Welcome, Kurt.
Welcome, David. What would you sooner do on a beautiful August evening than sit in the house and talk about hockey?
I was talking to my wife about writing hockey at this time of year, and I actually, and Bryn Griffiths asked me the same thing, like, what do you find to write about? I actually like writing hockey this time of year. It's, you can dig into stuff you wouldn't otherwise dig into, kind of things you're interested in. And I'm interested in kind of hockey history, hockey Oilers history, Oilers trends. And it's a good time to dig into that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, people like you and I have spent the better parts of our careers writing to deadlines. Well, there aren't many of those in the summer. So you can kind of sit back and enjoy what you're writing as opposed to pushing it out and checking it fast and all that kind of stuff. So.
And still, like, I'm always checking Twitter because you never know when something's going to break because we're waiting for that McDavid contract.
When will Connor sign?
Yeah. There's still the Podkolzin rumor that he might re-up. Wallman, Ekholm. Those seem to have cooled down a little bit. And I just wonder about, frankly, all of them, whether the right play might be to wait for all of them. I mean, they're like on Podkolzin, for instance. He had a really interesting year and he was quite a useful player. And if he gets scoring, if you add a little bit of scoring, let's say 15 goals to all of that, you're dealing with quite a valuable hockey player. But on the other hand, people bring up the Clean Costin comparison and say, well, what if he's flash in the pan, like good year, physical player, but then fizzles out? And you got him on like a 3-year deal at $2 million a year, let's say. What then? So might be good to wait.
Yeah, I think my take on him, which is I think he is a very useful player and performed well for the Oilers last year. But you can find those guys out there for not that much money. And as you said, David, you smartly put, until he produces, he's only worth so much. And I don't mean that to belittle the guy. I'm a fan of him as a player. But until you can score 15 goals in the NHL, there's a limit to how much you should be paid by any team, especially a team that's as close to the cap as the Oilers are.
I'm on the, since we're on this, got a little sidetracked because it wasn't even on our list, but I'm actually on the more in favor of signing him, Kurt, because what he brought last year, I thought, was enough to stick on a third line in the NHL, even if it's just 10 goals, let's say, on the Oilers, because they're so desperately in need of forechecking, physical play, a young, healthy forechecker who can get in there. And I saw quite some skill there too, which can always be misleading. Like we saw skill from Clean Costin too, didn't we? Like he scored some nice goals. But I think that Podkolzin, like if he signed a 2-year deal, for instance, I wouldn't be against that. I think he's quite a valuable player. And if you're paying him kind of third line-ish, low-end third line money, I'd be okay with that for 2 years. But
if you think about it, he produced what he did mostly playing with Leon Draisaitl.
He did. But the things he brought, forechecking, back-checking, hitting, that's independent of Draisaitl. Like the points he got, the amount of points he did, but which in the playoffs was a pretty good rate.
Yeah, but is that a fourth liner as opposed to third liner, right?
That's right. And you can't, you're dead in the NHL if you're overpaying fourth liners, as the Oilers have found out. Yep. Like they have a bad habit of doing that. So, the contracts I'm worried about re-upping is more Ekholm, because I just think he's 35 this year, man. And you're taking a huge risk if you re-up him at anywhere close to what he's making now. I just think that's ill-advised until you see if he's healthy or not.
Well, I do agree that if they're going to re-up a defenseman before they do Ekholm, they should look at Wallman, because I think he's the guy with the bigger upside at this point. I think he's a huge part of that puck-moving blue line that the Oilers are very lucky to have, and his relative youth is a pretty nice thing as well. So if you're trying to decide which guy to sign first, I think Wallman's the guy you got to make sure is locked down first before you go to Ekholm.
I agree, Kurt. And he's a good bet for 3, 4, 5 years. So if they can get a reasonable amount for that, I'd love to see him signed
Yep.
as well.
Second
All right.
unit power play guy. Like
Oh, yeah.
I really like what I saw from him last year, and he produced.
Smart with the puck, good with the puck, physical
Yep.
player in
Block
the playoffs.
shots.
I think in the regular season that he'll dial down the physical play to stay healthy, but in the playoffs he can amp it up. Really good with the puck and a smart defender. I liked his game a lot. So, Kurt, today we're going to go through. We've started our prospect series, and we're writing about the kind of the lower end prospects. We'll talk about some of those guys and trends in prospects. We'll talk a little bit about some Bako signings, and then we'll get into the heart of of this podcast, which I think is a discussion about the McDavid contract and about the cap situation, which the Oilers already find themselves in, which I will describe as cap hell. And in a way that they have not been up until this moment. And I don't think it's really sunk in Edmonton among the fan base exactly what the cap situation is with the Oilers. So we'll talk about that. And maybe we'll end off with maybe some PTOs discussion, who they might go there.
Yeah, let's go there before we sign off, for sure.
You started off, you've written about a couple goalies, Kurt. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're the only goal. No, there's still one more goalie to come, Samuel Johnson, who's rated the highest. But you started out with, we had Emil Vinny at 20th in our prospect rating, and Nathaniel Day at 17th. What do you think of those two guys as possible NHLers, Kurt?
When I sit back and try to look at both guys with a collective head, I honestly think that Vinny is the guy with more upside, albeit, coming off an injury, right?
Back injury.
But when you look at the whole product, he's a more enticing prospect. He's got good DNA. His dad is a really well respected goalie coach. His numbers are just a little bit better. His path is a little bit better. But the problem is, between both Vinny and Day, I think both of them are ECHL goaltenders.
Mm-hmm. Right now they are, yeah.
They are. And what I wrote about Day was, this season, if he ends up playing more games for the Condors than the Fort Wayne Comets, you should consider that a hugely successful season for him, right? That would be a win. I don't know that's going to happen. I'm not sure at all if that's going to happen, but I think that's a good measuring stick. But at the end of the day, I don't think either guy projects at their absolute ceiling higher than an NHL backup. And I'm not sure either one of them's that. But on the other hand, goalies are voodoo. And I joked before we started the podcast tonight, I said, gee, Dave, thanks for giving me two goaltenders in the top 20 to write about. But it's the gig. That's fine. But that's where I ended up. Both are kind of interesting guys. I'm a little higher on Vinny than I am on Day, but I'm not sure either guy, projects as a meaningful Edmonton Oiler down the road. And look, Nathaniel Day's a 6th round pick. 6th round picks don't have a habit of turning out in the NHL. And keep in mind, he was selected by Tyler Wright and Ken Holland. Yeah. He ain't Rick Precy's guy. And so that's why I know, even though our ranking put Day ahead of Vinny, I'm not so sure it isn't the other way around. When you consider the state of the organization today.
Yeah, Vinny, his injury, because he played only a handful of games last year, set him back a lot. So we really don't know where he's at. But Day had a good end of the year too. Like he went, when he got up to pro hockey, he did well in a little stint in, I think, the ECHL and a few AHL games. So he's also a great big guy. So those were two little up arrows right at the end of his season. So, I can see why we have Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson, he's higher in our rankings. He's also a big goalie, but he really ripped it up in this second Swedish league last year. Jonathan Willis, who used to write for us, wrote an interesting article about goalies, how difficult it is to identify goalie talent. NHL teams struggle with it. They come from everywhere in the draft, the good goalies, sometimes outside the draft. And he made an interesting point that if a goalie's going to be good, they're often good right away. Maybe not like when they're 18 when they're drafted, but you want to see a season like the one Samuel Johnson just had in the Swedish second division, where he rips it up, where he's one of the best goalies. Suddenly these guys seem to take off, and there's some question about how much they improve actually. Maybe they improve psychologically so they're better able to play in the NHL. But they're 20, 21, 22, they seem like they're kind of the same goalie. They get good and then they stay good for however long they're going to be good. So it'll be interesting to see, if it's going to happen for these goalies, Day and Vinny, for instance. I think it's tough to say this, but they've got to do it next year. They've got to show next year. Stuart Skinner, when he came on in the pros, he did it pretty fast. He was he might have had one rough year, but he came on and he was a good goalie after that in the AHL. And Samuel Johnson, I'm expecting, he's going to be with Tompkins in the AHL, I'm guessing. Unless there's someone I'm missing, I think those are the two slotted for there. He's got to get it done. Samuel, so all of these guys will know, if Jonathan's theory is correct and he's a pretty sharp observer of trends, we'll know soon whether they have it or not as real prospect goalies.
Here's a couple thoughts on your comments. One, the one difference with Johnson is he's played against men already, right?
Yeah.
Where the other two goaltenders really just a cup of coffee in pro.
Yeah.
Right. They're basically junior goaltenders.
Yeah.
So Johnson right away has got a leg up on them. The other thing is, keep in mind, Stuart Skinner was a top flight junior hockey goaltender.
Yeah.
Which neither of these other two guys were.
Well, right? Vinny was in Finland, I think.
Yeah, he wasn't the king of the castle. And Nathaniel Day, he was on a bad team. And he had one decent year, but his numbers weren't great. Stuart Skinner was the far superior junior goaltender to both of them. And Stuart Skinner is everybody has their opinions on Stu, and that's fine. But he's a starting goaltender in the NHL who's been to the Stanley Cup final twice. And so, when you look back at where goaltenders came from, I buy what you're saying about if goaltenders are going to be good, they're usually good right away. Well, he was good as a teenager.
Yeah.
Right. And is still, depending on your measurement of good today. These other guys, we'll see. I mean, cross your fingers. You hope for all these young men, right, that they have a good run. But I think experience has taught us that if one of those three turns out, we're damn lucky.
So I wrote about a defenseman who was rated more highly. He was a low-round draft pick, Nikita Yevsayev. He's number 18 on our list. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, Nikita Yevsayev, number 18.
Yep.
And Russian defenseman. He had a great season as an 18-year-old. It's really unusual for an 18-year-old D-man to get playing time in the KHL, but he was getting it. So it looked like, hey, we might have someone here. But since then, he's struggled. He's not been able to get more ice time. He's getting less. He seems to be less established as a KHL hockey player after 2 more seasons. So this is really a down arrow for a low draft pick. And it got me thinking about the Oilers' draft record with Russians. So I checked into it, Kurt, and it is abysmal. It is abysmal, the Oilers' draft record with Russians. Over the years, they've drafted more than 30 Russian hockey players, and not one of them, it's fair to say, except for, one exception, Anatoly Semenyov, who was a mainstay on the Soviet national team in the 80s, late 80s. They drafted him, and when he came over, he was good for a couple of years with the Oilers.
But he was already an established player.
He was 30, right? Like he was already so that's a little, but since, before then and since then, and mostly since then, they've drafted more than 30 guys, 2 first-round draft picks, 1 second, I think 7 third-round draft picks, and they haven't identified one really useful hockey player for them.
Where have you gone, Mil Yakubov?
And including arguably other than Greg Jolly, maybe, or with Greg Jolly, the worst pick in National Hockey League history, Nail Yakupov. So, and then, they had, the other first round pick was Alexei Mikhnov, this giant kind of Dustin Penner of the KHL, who never played 2 games with the Oilers, never made it here. And not only, Kurt, if you look close, the sad thing is not only have a lot of the Oilers draft picks not made it in the NHL, haven't been very good KHL players either. A lot, like at least 2/3 of them haven't lived up to their potential, even on the other side of the pond in Russia or Europe. They haven't been good players. So right now we've got 3 guys: Matvei Petrov, who just had a arrows down year in Bakersfield, Yevsayev, and Maxim Berezhkin, who is quite a strong prospect, viewed by everybody as a very strong prospect for the Oilers. So maybe he'll break through, but man, it has been a long and ugly run of failure. And my guess, Kurt, is it is mainly a failure of scouting, of identifying talent, of players who can play the North American game, who have that ability to do it, whatever it is. And they're picking the wrong kinds of players. And then also they've done a horrendous job of any kind of development with, maybe that's really hard with the Russian players because they're so entrenched in the KHL. But I just think they've had really poor scouting there for a long time.
I don't have an opinion on the scouting except to say you're probably right. What I do know is on the development side, the Oilers have really been behind the curve on the development side of things for years now. And honestly, they're probably only catching up now in the Stan Bowman era. And so, well, I agree with your assessment, and it's pretty bleak. But you really can't hang any of that on the new guys. So
not on Bowman.
So you have to hope that they see this and they're in the process of correcting it, because that's a pool of players that you can't ignore. So
Brian Lawton was recently interviewed. I think this was on the John Shannon's 100% Hockey podcast with Millard. And Lawton talked about in the 90s when he became a scout, one of the first things he did was to start to focus on the development of his draft picks. So starting to spend money himself as an agent to help develop his players. And it was like no one was doing it then.
Yep.
But the agents started to do that. The best agents started to do that in the early 2000s, like 20 years ago now, a long time ago now. It seems fresh in our memories perhaps, but 20 years ago now. And the NHL teams, the best ones, started to do that too at that time, really to have a focus on working with these players. And I agree with you, Kurt. The Oilers they have not done well in that regard. And maybe some of these Russian players would have turned out better otherwise. But yeah. All right. I also have written about 2 American defensemen, Asher Barnett, and just tonight, Paul Fisher. What I noticed with the it's interesting how many good American defensemen the Oilers have had, but how crappy the Oilers have been at keeping them in Edmonton. So, in terms of Oilers all-time game played for defensemen, there's 2 Americans in the top 15. Lee Fogelin, who I see as kind of a nominal American, like his dad was an NHLer in Chicago. He was born there. And I don't know, though, if he actually grew up in the States or in Canada and is actually more a product of the Canadian system. And then Tom Gilbert, who had some really good years here in Edmonton and then was traded. But he was still in his prime when he was traded.
I like Tom Gilbert.
I liked him a lot. Jeff Petrie, who I really liked, traded even before he hit his prime.
He got treated like a 3-legged dog in Edmonton. Don't start me on Jeff Petrie in Edmonton.
Tom Pody, he played 824 NHL games, but he didn't even play 300 of them in Edmonton before he got kicked out of town. Matt Green, who became a mainstay in Los Angeles, a really useful defenseman there, and John Marino, who didn't even want to come here. Those are the 4 defensemen who played the most, drafted by the Oilers, who have played the most games. But the Oilers didn't choose to keep them. And Michael Kesselring's the latest one, who didn't play any games with the Oilers, even though the Oilers took a long time to develop him, worked with them. And now he looks like he's probably going to break into the top 4 in Buffalo this year. He's got a chance to do so. So I don't know exactly why this is. It's true that few players, for a long time, few players stayed in Edmonton for their whole careers, often for money issues or they wanted to go elsewhere. Maybe this is just an expression of that. But there are a lot of Canadian players who have stuck around for a long time in Edmonton, and we just haven't done a very good job with the American D-men. But maybe one of Barnett and Fisher will defy those odds. They're both similar players, really good skating defensemen, average size, really good positional defenders, really good defenders. Need to work on their offensive games if they're going to make the NHL. Fisher strikes me as a fairly decent prospect. A lot of guys, we have him at 16th. Bruce Kurlock had him in the top 10. Scott Wheeler has him in his top 10 for the Oilers, and Stephen Ellis of the Daily Faceoff has him in the top 10. So I'm guessing we've probably those guys generally know more. They know more about the prospects than we do. They see these guys, and I think we might have underrated them. At least Fisher. We've underrated Fisher in our rankings, which will happen now and then. But there's a lot of other players who have, since those rankings came out, there has been some new players that have joined the Oilers system too.
I won't judge our rankings until these guys turn or don't turn into players.
Fair enough, Kurt. Looking back at the rankings over the years, like where people, like you're thinking, okay, who does well in this? And it's like all over the place. Like it's
yeah.
No, if anyone had a crystal ball, they'd be the highest paid scout in the world, and nobody has a crystal ball, and they all get it wrong.
We wouldn't be doing a podcast at 9:00 at night on a Tuesday.
Damn tootin', we would not. All right. Yeah, drop this guy. He's oh, you did it again. You got it again. All right. Kurt, the Bakersfield Condors signed a bunch of players. The two that caught my eye were the Pitlick brothers, Rem and Rhett Pitlick. And they also signed a big defenseman who played for the Oil Kings, Luke Prokop, who he's struggled as a minor league player. The Pitlick brothers, if you look at them, Rem was in the NHL for a while and did okay with Montreal, and Rat just had a fairly decent season in U.S. college hockey, and then he had 6 points in 6 games. Now, all these players are signed to AHL contracts. Do you think any of them have a chance at the NHL?
I think Prokop does, actually. When you look at the player type that he is,
yes.
This guy's 6'5", 225 pounds.
Yeah.
And huge. He can skate. Right?
Can he skate? I've never seen him play.
He moves well for the old hockey saying, right? Moves well for a big man. Well, that's what he does. He moves well for a big man.
He was a third round pick.
Yeah, and he's a right shot, right? So
okay.
Look, if Vinny Desharnais can take a regular shift in the NHL, why can't this guy, who is as I'm told, is a far superior skater than Vinny ever thought of being? So now you've got to go from an AHL contract to an NHL contract before you got a shot. But I think if he goes down there and plays well and plays with some edge, I think he does have a chance if injuries crop up. No one's trying to pretend that any of these guys are going to come up and be top 6 forwards or top 4, pairing D-man. But can they contribute in the next year or two at the Oilers? I think Prokop has a chance because his skating is decent, because of his side, because of his handedness. I'm not surprised they took a shot on him, hometown boy. So I'll watch him carefully and see how he develops.
Yeah, he had a good year with the Oil Kings in, I think it's 2019-20.
Yep, he had 33 points in 55 games.
21-22, yeah, 33 points, 55 games.
Yeah.
So of course, he was an older player in the WHL, and it's not unusual to see them have big years. If they're going to have it, they better have it then. So, but I agree, you can't teach size, and big defensemen go a long way in the NHL. They're really useful. Kurt, there's a trade rumor that popped up. Came out of Boston. It's a guy who writes um, in depth on the Boston's farm team and draft picks. And he was speculating that the Bruins might be getting ready to move. And what's his name here? Swedish winger. It was taken first round pick, Fabian Lysell. He's a smaller player, about 5'11", 185 or so. And when of course he was drafted 21st overall. I think it's in the 21 draft. One pick before the Oilers took Xavier Bourgault. So, but with high hopes, he's a super fast guy, really moves well, passes the puck well. And he's in his third year in the AHL. He had a big year in his second year, almost a point per game. But last year he kind of lapsed and he was down to 2 points every 3 games again. So it's not, in terms of this rumor, I suspect the Boston writer has heard something. But what I suspect is it's that Boston's thinking this guy needs
a second opinion.
Exactly. Thanks for finishing that thought. I was thinking of that. That's the term. A second opinion. So he does have one more year on his ELC. So, because I think he signed as an underage, like a 18 or 19-year-old, his first AHL year, so it didn't count on his ELC because he's coming from Europe. But he's got one more year. They can watch him for one more year, but they're probably thinking, let's try to get some value out of him while he still has, because he has value. They've seen him a lot in the organization. It's the same coach. It's last year, same GM. They've had for a while, I believe, in Boston. They've kept the same GM, haven't they? Or have they?
Yeah,
Sweeney?
Boston's a bit of a mess, if you ask me right now.
Yeah,
have been for a couple of years.
I don't think so. Some of the players mentioned in a trade for him were Matt Savoy and Vasily Podkolzin, which was pure pipe dream lunacy. But because he's probably worth, like a player like Bo Akey, right? A prospect for the Oilers, second round pick, who hasn't really turned out, who's trended down a bit since he was drafted, been hurt.
Injury.
Might trend up. He's younger, though, than Lysell, so he has 3 years left on his ELC. That gives the team plenty of time to work with him, whereas this guy has 1 year left. And these are really important considerations when you're trading prospects. It's like, how long do you have him on your ELC? How long can you develop this guy before you have to really start to pay him? But I just don't see this player being a fit on the Oilers.
Why would you acquire him when Matt Savoy and Isaac Howard are already on your team? Two undersized skill forwards.
Yeah.
Right.
And Mangiapane, same thing, right?
Same thing, just older, right? Yeah. So, look, I think he'd be a useful guy to have in your system. But you'd have to pay an appropriate price to bring him in, and nothing close to what these guys in Boston are dreaming. Like, nice try. It's like, sure, I'd have him in Bakersfield and see how he pans out, but he ain't playing on the Oilers, and so no. I'll believe it when I see it, and I don't think I'll see it. I guess we'll find out.
I don't think we'll see it either. I don't know how Edmonton came up as a possibility for the player, because when you look at who the Oilers, with the 3 guys they're trying to break in, Mangiapane, Savoy, and Howard, he's like the fourth winger of this type, and they're already pushing it. Like, I think you can win in the NHL with a couple wingers like that.
Yeah.
But you're starting to push it when you get 3, 4, 5 of them. And the Oilers are going to be pushing it. Now, fortunately, I think maybe all 3 of those guys play fairly gritty games. I know Savoy does, just from the limited amount I've seen him. And I think Mangiapane does as well. He's a good checker. Yep. So we'll see with Howard. Howard better, like he's got to, or he won't be sticking.
But they're still all under 6 feet tall.
They're still smaller players, and that makes a difference in the playoffs. Like, you're going up against like that Florida defense, man. Like, and it's not just the Florida defense. There's a lot Vegas defense, LA defense. All of these defenses are big, tough hockey players, and good luck.
So 2 thoughts on this. One, I wonder if his name came up as a possible package when Edmonton went looking for a goaltender. I wonder how the conversation started, right? So I
agree, Kurt.
Yeah, that popped into my head. The other thing is, vis-a-vis my comment on small wingers, that's why I think it's key to watch over the next couple of weeks to see what the Oilers do with PTOs.
Yeah.
because we have smaller forwards, good forwards, but smaller forwards on our roster. And I think we're still missing a bit of beef. And I wrote about this a few weeks back. And the two guys who I believe are possible to be PTOs in Edmonton, one, you've already mentioned him, Klim Kostin.
Yeah.
The other one, Brett Leeson.
Yes.
Both are NHL quality players with a little bit of skill, and they're big, and they're not afraid of the rough going. I don't think you need both of those guys, but adding one of those guys on your roster may be quite useful. If it's someone like Leeson, he'd be a solid fourth liner. He can bring some size, he can bring some heavy, little bit of skill. I think Kostin is the tougher of the two, the better fighter of the two. I'm not sure how much value there's in fighting in the NHL these days, but for what it's worth, I think it's more important you bring in a player like one of those two guys as opposed to bring in another guy that's 5'10".
Here's what I'd like to see. I like Leeson. I like I've seen he can skate. He's big. Clean Costin's interesting. He's really struggled. Like, can he be the Costin that we saw 2 years ago? Like, can he bring back that player? Maybe not. Like, maybe he's not in the right physical or mental state to replicate those kind of results. If he can, he was a very explosive hockey player who added a lot to the Oilers.
And his teammates liked him.
Yeah. What's not to like? A big, tough, aggressive winger with a good shot.
Yeah.
Who goes up and down his wing. Like, a few defensive mistakes, but not bad. And he really played well in the playoffs, really well in the playoffs. So I've got a lot of time for that idea. What I'd like to see more than anything else is Max Pacioretty. And if you just look at his numbers, like he was hurt, he's been hurt quite a bit, but in the playoffs in the last 2 years and in the regular season, if you look at like points per 60 and hits per 60, Kurt, he ranks as a top power forward in the NHL still. He was in the top 10 in those categories for both the playoffs and the regular season. This guy in limited minutes is a player. And what I'd like to see is not actually him on a PTO, but come December or January, for Max to take the fall off, heal up, get ready, get on the ice, start working, and sign a contract with the Oilers in January or something like that for the second half of the season. I think he can. Based on how he played last year, I think he could bring some of what Corey Perry brought, except more hitting. Perry was a good scorer in the playoffs, but he's not a hitter anymore. Pacioretty still hits, and the key for him will be getting healthy, getting rested, and only half. This is the deal: play half the year, man. Take off. You talk to him now, work it out, and have that as kind of a plan. If it works for both of them, go to that.
I have lots of respect for Max Pacioretty as an NHL player. My problem is, even if he does have something left in the tank, I just don't know if he can hold all the pieces together anymore, David. It's you see this with players of his age and his player type, right?
Oh yeah.
On one hand, we like the way he plays because he's not afraid to go to the dirty areas. He's not afraid to lay the body, but that physical punishing play exacts a price on players. And after a while, you start to break down and you just can't do it anymore. And I'm just not convinced that he can hold it together anymore. And so I'd be very cautious on a guy like that for that reason only.
I agree. This is why, like, bringing Kostin now, bringing Leeson now, like, try these guys out. If they don't work, then you got something on the back burner. Like, it's you just talk to him and you plant the seed, see if he's open to it, see if it, then you return to it and see, like, December, see, does it, maybe the Oilers don't need that then, and maybe they don't do that, but maybe that's something that they think about that.
I think there's some merit in that, and he'll only want to come back if he can play for a winning team, right? So you'd have if you're in the hunt, then he'd look at you, right? So yeah, no, I hear you, and he would have he's played in Canada before, he'd have no trouble playing for a Canadian team. So yeah, no, I hear what you're saying.
He was a good playoff performer this year for the Maple Leafs, I believe. So
yep.
All right, Kurt, let's move on to cap hell, as I am calling it. And the reason I'm calling it that is it's not just that the Oilers are at the top of the cap like a lot of teams. So every contending team almost is going to be just pushing the cap. And this is the last year where they can cheat or like whatever they want to call it. I'll just call it cheating because I think it's blatantly cheating. And all these teams have been doing it since Tampa started doing it 5 years ago, 2 years in a row to win the cup. Bringing in, having players injured at the end of the year, using their cap space to bring in other players to bolster the team, and then bringing back the injured player in the playoffs. I believe it's the last year you can do that, and I think the team that wins the cup this year, my prediction is, will do that almost certainly, because the only team that didn't do it in the last few years that won the cup was Colorado. So I think we're going to see that, and but the Oilers, when you look at the history of the salary cap, and what the top end players on a team are paid, there's only been 3 teams in the last 20 years since they've had the salary cap, only 3 teams that have paid more than 45% of the cap to their top 4 players and then gone on to win the cup. There's only been 3 teams that did that. And 2 of them were early on. They were Detroit and Anaheim early on, like 2007 and 2008, and Pittsburgh, I believe, in 2016. I think Pittsburgh in 2016 paid 47.3% of the cap towards their top 4 players. So they're the only 3 teams. The average Stanley Cup winning team has paid 40% of their cap dollars to their top 4 players. So last year, in the last few years, as McDavid's contract has gone down against the cap, and Draisaitl hasn't been on his new contract, and Bouchard has been a value player, the Oilers haven't been paying a high percentage of their cap to their top 4 players. They've been around 41, 42%, I think it was last year. So they're right in the running. They're right in the range of teams that win the Stanley Cup, paying that amount of money to their top 4 players. And they've made the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row. This year, with the raise to Draisaitl and the raise to Bouchard, they're paying 48% of their cap to their top 4 players: McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, and Nurse. So this puts them in uncharted territory in terms of winning the Stanley Cup. And as great as those 4 players are, there's only so much money to go around after that. So the Oilers are going to need 2 things to win the cup this year, Kurt, cap-wise. They're going to need Howard and Savoy and other players at the bottom end of the cap to really come through and to be top 9, if not top 6 forwards in the NHL, and decent ones. They're going to need that from those 2 players, and maybe Tomasek to come through as well. Another guy who's not earning that much this year. Plus, frankly, like any team competing for the cup this year under the old NHL rules, they're going to need timely injury issues so they can bring in 1 or 2 really good players at the deadline that will bolster their team, and then bring other players back for the playoffs in order to compete. And I'm not just saying that the Oilers need that. Any team that's going to win the cup is going to need that this year. So they're going to need those 2 things to get out of what is uncharted territory for a Stanley Cup winner. Your thoughts?
I think that you don't get to the Stanley Cup Finals without those good players, and that's what those good players cost. And I think most of this problem goes away if Darnell Nurse plays to his potential.
Ain't that the truth? So the issue is, it's not McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard, although Draisaitl's faded in the playoffs the last 2 years as they've gone along.
Jeez.
I would argue.
That's what you call faded?
No, he's been great in the first few rounds, but he did score against Florida in this round of the finals. But I won't
mark him as hard as you're marking him.
All right, fair enough. We've already had this discussion several times.
So
it's Bouchard and McDavid have they've been fantastic,
Yes.
and Draisaitl's been really good. Nurse has been. It's not just Nurse has been not a $9 million in the playoffs. He's been a defenseman that they would be better off not having in the lineup in the playoffs, in my opinion. And some people may disagree with that. He hasn't been close. So I agree, Kurt. If he comes through in the playoffs, if he plays as well in the playoffs as he does in the regular season, that solves a lot of this. That's another issue right there. So and it's a real possibility because I think he's got it in him. He's just got to figure out how to do it, and he's a big boy. He can figure that out, I think.
Yeah. Because it's not like they don't have value contracts. Like Zach Hyman at $5.5 million. That's a value contract.
Oh God, yeah.
You're not overpaying Ryan Nugent Hopkins at $5 million a year. Jake Wallman's at 3.4.
If Ekholm's playing well, he's a 9-10 million. If he's playing at his potential, which he wasn't last year, he's a $9 or $10 million defenseman.
And he's only bringing down 6. So
yeah. So and Pod Colson and I wouldn't say Adam Henrique's a value player. I think he's at $4 million a year, but he's worth that. Like in the playoffs, he's worth that. Like
he was very good in the playoffs this year.
So there's only one guy who really underperforms his contract in the playoffs but it's such a significant way because he plays such a crucial role on the team.
So many minutes.
It is such a conundrum for the Oilers, and it's a conundrum for Nurse personally to come through. So you're right. Like good player, like you could, the counter argument is the one you just made. Like it's unusual for a team to have 3 such stars as McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard bundled up, and you're of course you're paying for them, and of course you're going to pay more than other teams did because you have these guys. But Chicago had 3 pretty good players, in Keith, Taves, and Kane. Pittsburgh had 3 pretty good players: Crosby, Letang, and Malkin. So there have been other teams that have been loaded with superstars that didn't pay quite as much for those superstars as the Oilers are paying this year. Now, in future years, it's going to come down to what McDavid gets in his contract. And we don't, John Shannon was suggesting, again, 3 or 4 years on the deal for less money, as John put it on Friday on Oilers Now, for less money than most people are thinking. But I think what John's talking about is $16 million a year, because I think a lot of people are now starting to think 18. But I think we will see something pretty close to $16 million a year. That's still going to keep the Oilers in cap hell, the same kind of percentage for the top 4 players next year when the cap goes up. But after that, if the cap keeps going up, and it will in the following year, the next year, it'll start to get down to a more reasonable level. But they are paying a lot for that top end talent, and it will have an impact on their Stanley Cup chances because you can't afford all the players you want then.
So here's a wrinkle on Connor McDavid, and I know everybody would like him to sign for 8. What if he signs for 1 at $14 million?
1 year at 14. Kurt, it's a possibility, right? Like, so some people will lose their minds if he just signs a 1 year deal.
Of course.
But I would be surprised. I think there's a chance he would sign for 2 years at 14. It's in the long run, in terms of his life earnings, how much of a difference does it make between 14 and 16 for 2 years?
Will he still get his money down the road, right?
Yeah. And again, if you win the Stanley Cup, you get more endorsement money. You can make more money that way. And so he might make back that, the $2 million he gives up. Let's say he was planning to sign for $16 million for 4. If he signs for 14 for 2, and he increases the chances of winning the cup that much more, you could easily make up that amount of money in endorsements. You just need 1 or 2 deals.
Or after that 2 years is up, then he signs for a higher amount because, you know what I mean? So in other words, if you still have Connor McDavid for the next years, for the next 10 years, for the exact same amount of money, but you can prorate it by paying him a little bit less for 2 years and then more later on. Now that's 2 separate contracts. There's no way that I'm aware of that you can structure it that way. But if you have a gentleman's agreement where it's like, then he's still getting the same amount of money in the end. He's still looking after his family. That should be his priority. But this way, it gives the club some slack when, as you describe it, they could use some slack.
See what happens. I mean, and again, I don't begrudge Connor McDavid whatever he signs for. I'll be happy if he signs at Edmonton. I'll be thrilled. I will be thrilled if he leaves Edmonton. I'm okay with that. Like, I won't be thrilled, but I'm okay with that. Like, he can do what he wants. This is the system. It's not some Oilers owner selling him, for and trying to pass it off as a trade. This is the NHL in 2025. Players, they get to a certain age, they're free to go where they want. That's how it works.
Yep.
And so is Connor McDavid. So if that happens, that happens. It's just when what we're doing is something that I think he's doing, and we know he's doing it because when he's weighing the chances of winning compared to how much money he makes. And he talked last summer when players signed for less in Edmonton. He pointed that out in an interview. He said, like, it's great. Guys want to stay here and they're taking less to stay here. He said it. He knows the score. They all know the score. He's been in the NHL long enough. He's so established now. He knows this all inside out. He knows the cap stuff inside out. He knows what it means. He knows he's seen the Oilers scrounge for an extra $50 to $100 or $200,000 at the trade deadline. He's seen them grind for that at the trade deadline. They gave up extra picks last year to get Trent Frederick at the deadline, even though he couldn't play the rest of the regular season. They had to give up more so in case he did. So he knows all that, and he knows what a difference it will make for the team if he takes a little less. And I would have really liked if Bouchard, for instance, just had taken $10 million, for instance. That would have been great. But again, I don't begrudge it because he's a great hockey player and he's worth it. But we'll see what McDavid does, and whatever it is, I'm cool with it. But as a fan, I'd like it a little less than more.
My theory is I think Connor has earned the right to ask for whatever he wants to ask for, and I think that Stan Bowman should push the contract across the table with the amount blank and go from there. It's the free market system.
I think that's what will happen essentially.
Yeah.
So it's not much of a negotiation. And I don't even know, like, the arguments that I'm making and you're making, that Bowman even has to make them. McDavid knows those arguments.
Smart guy.
He knows the salary cap situation. He knows the percentages of the cap. He knows all these things. He probably knows what Crosby took on his, I guess, third contract after his ELC, and his second contract, his third contract. He knows, like, I think it was Crosby took like 13.3% of the cap. If McDavid took that this year, I think it would be, I'm not exactly sure, like 12 point something million. It's not going to be that low, but he knows all of that stuff. He's a smart guy, and he wants to win the cup. So we'll see what happens next.
Well, if he isn't the best, he's at worst the second best thing to ever happen to this franchise. And so if he isn't worth it, nobody is.
Yeah. Gretzky was the best thing that ever happened to the Oilers.
That's kind of why I hedged my bet.
But McDavid is the second best, and they're both. How about this? They're both the best.
Yep, I'll buy that.
Well, Kurt, any other thoughts or anything you'd like to add, or
other than that, I'm really impressed that we filled an hour with hockey talk on the the 19th of August. Oilers fans, God bless them, hey?
Yes, indeed. Kurt, thanks for talking tonight.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
And in the meantime, and in between time, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.